Alright guys, welcome back, and we're looking at example 2, and in this particular angle we're going to be finding, in this particular example, we're going to be asked to find the measure of an angle. So I'm going to say this right away. Whenever you're using cosine rule to find an angle, you have to be extremely careful with your steps. So we're going to get into it and then you're going to understand what I mean. Now, in this particular example, there's no capital letters given on the diagram. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put on these capital letters, and I'm going to use P, Q, and R. So what I'm going to do now is ensuring that I put on the common letters. So big P, little p, big Q, little q, and big R, letter R. So I've ensured that I put on the letters, and now I can proceed. But it says calculate the measure of angle theta, and notice that theta is big P. So please note that theta is big P. Now let's proceed with the solution to the question. Let me just make a note of this, that theta is now big P. So I'm going to slide this over here and proceed to the working out of the question. Now, because we're being asked to find theta, and theta is big P, it simply means then that we're starting the formula with P squared. So P squared is equal to Q squared plus R squared minus 2QR times the cosine of big P. Now, all we need to do is find what P is using the equation. And again, we're just incorporating the letters used in the diagram into the formula. Alright, so you're accustomed to seeing A, B, C. It doesn't really matter as long as you have P squared, as long as you have the letters that are relayed in terms of information on the diagram. Just incorporate those in the formula and then you're good to go. So P squared is equal to Q squared plus R squared minus 2QR times cos of P. So let's start plugging in the values now. So little p is 6 all squared. Little q is 8 all squared. Little r is 10 all squared minus 2 times 8 times 10 times cosine of p. And remember, that's what we need to find, what p is. If you know what p is, then we know what theta is. So again, P is 6, so we have 6 squared. Q is 8, so we have 8 squared. R is 10, so we have 10 squared, and we can continue. So 6 squared is 36, 8 squared is 64, 10 squared is 100. And just taking it into stages, we're not rushing anything. All right, never rush your steps. All right. So what we have here is 36 equals 64 and 100 is 164, minus 2 times 80 is minus 160 times the cos of P. Now we have to be extremely careful with what we're doing here now. So what I'm going to do now is put an asterisk beside this step, because from this step we have to be extremely careful. So now, again, the multiplication suggests that these two are married and paired, so you cannot separate them. In other words, you cannot do the subtraction here. It is not to be done. So what has to be moved is the positive 164 to carry over. So what we're going to have is 36 minus 164. It's positive here, carry over, it becomes negative, equal, and the minus sign belongs to the 160. So it's negative 160. So even though I'm moving the 164, this here belongs to 160 and remains. So that's negative 160 times the cosine of P. Now I'm going to work this out here. 36 minus 164. So 36 minus 164 equals negative 128. This is negative 128 equals negative 160 times the cos of P. So what I'm going to be doing here now is I want to have cos of P alone on one side. So basically I'm going to be dividing both sides by negative 160 because I want to have cos P alone, because I want to make P the subject. So what I'm going to be having is negative 128 divided by negative 160, which is equal to the cos of P. So if you take your time now and be very careful with what you're doing. So I'm dividing a negative number by another negative number. So I'm going to end up with a positive answer. So I'm just going to get rid of the positive signs right away. Cos of P. So let's slide this over here so we can see what we're doing in terms of the continuation of the problem. So quickly, I'm just going to divide 128 by 160 on the calculator to determine what I'm going to get there. So 128 divided by 160, that's going to be equal to 0.8. So 0.8 is going to be equal to the cos of P. And this can be written like this. It's the same thing. And of course, if we're finding an angle, the inverse step must be involved. So P equals the cos inverse of 0.8. So we can punch that in on the calculator. So this is going to give us 36.86 now. It's an angle, so I'm just going to put it to one decimal place. But again, you must honor what is being requested or asked for in the exam. So P is going to be equal to 36.86. I'm going to put that 36.9 degrees. All right. Now remember, that asks us for theta, but we know that theta is big P. So all I'm going to do is write afterwards. Therefore, theta is going to be equal to 36.9 degrees. And that is how you use cosine rule to answer these questions in terms of finding an angle. But you have to be extremely careful from this step going forward, because a lot of students make the mistake of doing the subtraction when they're not supposed to. And also, sometimes when they do the correct thing and move the 164 over, they tend to put this as positive when it didn't move. So the negative 160 would still be the negative 160 because I didn't move. The only thing that moved was a positive 164, which came over here, which should have changed the sign. So you have to be very careful when you're using the cosine rule to find an angle in particular. You have to be careful in general when you're doing math and make sure that your steps are sound. But we have to ensure that when you're using the cosine rule to find an angle that we observe from here, or correct steps in terms of movement of the correct numbers in terms of determining what the outcome is going to be. All right, guys. Now, I hope you guys found this video insightful, and I'll see you guys on the next video.